Hey, it's Brad. So, over the past, I don't know, decade or so, there's been a pleasant trend of kids' shows having a lot more layered value for adults and really for the kids as they age. And a couple of the recent ones that have come on are pretty interesting. Um, I haven't seen all of them, and I think one of them is a limited run, and the other one's ongoing, and only the first season's out. But so I'm going to ramble about them a little, and it's kind of pseudo spoilers. So, you know, some of it's theoretical stuff, or just discussion, exploration of the concepts and potential layers of meaning or whatever. But firstly, I hate when you ascribe a specific meaning to something, say this is what that means, this is what that represents, unless that's specifically intended, and even then sometimes that's not enough. But if you assign a specific meaning, and that just flattens the potential layers. Unless of course the assignment is potentially questionable. So anyway, spoiler alert, and I might summarize the concepts again in a spoiler-free version. But for the shows 12 Forever and Infinity Train, those are the new ones that my kids and I and a buddy of mine sometimes have been watching. So 12 Forever, both of these could be taken as, on one level or another, a girl that's, prepubescent, potentially dying and trying to, whether it's work her way through the afterlife or resolve things in her mind, in the final flash of conscious thought, or whatever it is. But it's, either way, it's really interesting how there's multiple layers to it. So, in different ways, like Infinity Train is a little more mature, more of a probably teenage mentality, like the kind of things that a teenager might have to deal with. And the other one, 12 Forever, is more of, prepubescent, like developing from a child, generally androgynous, to a specified gender, teenager, hormones affecting body and everything else. And obviously that's a whole different issue of exploration and conversation to be had on the value of those rites and rites of passage. But again, I'm going to limit myself with that. And so the characters on 12 Forever, it's the main girl, redhead, both of them are redheads, and she has this world, like an imaginary world that she goes to, but it's persistent, and her friends can go to it. Recreational drug connotations aside, it's an interesting, dynamic that maps onto a lot of social relationships and creative endeavors. But there are a lot of characters where very, pet cemetery and loaded with like Jungian archetypes and all that, and those images and schema, where you bury something. Say there's a thought that you don't want to confront, some concept you don't want to explore, but your mind is like, okay, well, this is cognitive dissonance, I want to resolve it. It puts that energy that doesn't get resolved, doesn't flow on, gets stuck there. And if you think of the energy as being conscious, you can think of that as being like a little sliver, a little fiber of conscious thought, a little kind of a shard of your soul that's just looping, trying to resolve it, trying to figure out, okay, what is the right conclusion for this? What's the right mapping for this information? And I mean, if you can get yourself to view consciousness as being, aggregate from like bundles of consciousness fibers, then you could view those bits of energy that are in unresolved or potentially unresolvable loops as those bits are kind of in hell, because they're atemporal. They're not getting resolved, and they just, whenever there's more energy put to it, that's just like putting more time with no potential resolution if you just keep running away from it. Anyway, so they when they bury things, they come to life as characters, and a really interesting duality of, like, imagine if in a dream or a vision or something, whatever is spoken is almost like a manuscript description, like a like narration of reality, whereas what exists there kind of is analog of a conscious or unconscious or subconscious thought. That's just one more lens to keep on the dial to look through. But a lot of the characters look like various parts of the brain or parts of the body, and there are a ton of innuendos, but generally, the more direct or more mature the viewer would need to be to understand it, the more layered they are. And that's good. That's what I would prefer. I don't want my kids that don't need to be hearing sexual conversation to understand that there are references to that. Whereas later on in life, when they're exposed to those things, they're like, oh yeah, this is kind of like in that one show. So it gives them some potential value, references and kind of signposts there. But it kind of distills all of that into just metaphor. It's interesting, but I haven't. I'm curious where it's going to go. Infinity Train, they're releasing it on air, and they started in the middle of the season, in the middle of the set, and then played through and looped back. And I've only seen a few of them, but the bits and pieces I have are really interesting. It seems like a girl that her parents are getting divorced, and her dad bails on her, and she hops out the window and just runs away in a snowy area, and seems like all of a sudden there's this light blasting through the trees, and it's a train. She gets on the train. There's train ferrying souls in all sorts of imagery, like Final Fantasy 3 or 6, depending on what version. There's the soul train, where to help this one character's dead relatives get closer, he helps the train get on its way. So the girl, gets onto the train, and she gets this countdown on her hand. It's like things to resolve, different blocks in her mind, and really kind of hard to come to grips with. But I don't know, there's just too much to really describe right away, so I'm going to save most of that for another talk.